The high desert air, thin and sharp as a new knife, carried the sound. Ayana Key, known to the white men in the valley below as Ash, closed her eyes. She sorted the sound from the natural breath of the wind passing over the Mogollon rim. It was not the crack of a dry branch or the skid of a loose stone. It was metal striking metal, an unnatural rhythm. It was the sound of theft. She moved without thought, her moccasins finding purchase on the oxidizing rock, making no more noise than the shadow of the hawk circling far above. She was a warrior of the wildfire people. The wildfire people. And this was their sacred place. Firebird Valley. Below her, where the creek bed widened near the canyon mouth, she saw them. 3 men. They were not prospectors. They carried surveyor's tools, but they wore their rifles with a familiarity that spoke of occupations other than measuring the earth. They were driving stakes into the ground, pounding them deep with a heavy sledge. Ash settled behind a knot of juniper, her body vanishing into the landscape. She watched them work, her heart a cold stone in her chest. This was the land she was sworn to protect. Her goal was simple: to keep the land whole, to keep her people safe, and to keep the honor of the ancestors intact. The white men called her the Gold Apache. The name was a bitter joke, a misunderstanding so profound it tasted like ash in her mouth. She had found the gold vein, the vein of yellow metal, 7 winters ago during a desperate hunt. She had stumbled upon it, a glittering seam in the frozen earth, and had hidden it immediately. Gold was a sickness. Her people knew this. It drew men like flies to a carcass. It did not mean life. It meant the end of it. Now, the sickness was here. These men were staking a claim that was not theirs to make. She recognized the brand on the horse tethered nearby. A stylized black bird, wings spread. The black vultures. That meant the man leading them, though she could not see him clearly from this distance, was likely Silas Crow. Crow was a man who lived by the gun and the rope, a shadow that fell long and dark over the territory. And a shadow, Ash knew, must be cast by something. The something was Baron Henry Mallory, a name whispered in the saloons of Dust Haven, a name spoken with fear and false hope. Mallory was the railroad. He was the bank in the east. He was the invisible hand pushing the iron spikes west, carving up the country, swallowing territories whole. He wanted a route through the mountains, and Silas Crow was the tool he used to clear the way. Sheriff Pike, the law down in Dust Haven, was another tool, a dull one, but heavy enough to crush dissent. Pike was bought. Crow was hired. Mallory was the architect of the theft. They wanted the valley, not for its beauty, but for the rumor of what lay beneath it, the rumor she had accidentally started. The men finished their work, packing their instruments. They swung onto their horses and rode back toward the town, laughing, their voices echoing off the canyon walls. Ash waited until the sound was gone, swallowed by the immense silence of the high country. She moved down the slope, her feet sure, and stood over the stakes they had driven. Fresh pine, sharp and smelling of resin, driven into the sacred earth. She gripped the first stake and pulled. It resisted, dug in deep. She set her feet, her muscles coiling, and ripped it from the ground. She threw it aside and moved to the next, and the next, until the markers of their trespass were gone. She looked toward Dust Haven, a smudge of dust and raw lumber miles away. The fight was coming. She could smell it, just as she could smell the rain that was still a day away. Far to the east, a different kind of traveler felt the grit between her teeth. Eleanor Whitcomb stared out the window of the lurching stagecoach, her reflection a pale ghost against the endless expanse of red rock and bleached sky. The journey had lasted 6 days since she had left the terminus of the railroad. 6 days of being hammered by the unforgiving suspension and choked by the alkali dust that found its way through every crack in the coach. She was 24 years old and utterly, terrifyingly alone. She had been cast aside. The words were stark, biblical. Her father, a man who measured the world in ledgers and political alliances, had demanded she marry Arthur Mallory the nephew of the great Baron Henry Mallory, a connection that would have secured the Whitcomb family's fortunes for another generation. Eleanor had looked at Arthur, a man with damp hands and a weak chin, and she had said no. The refusal had been catastrophic. Her father, in a controlled, icy rage, had given her the choice: marry the man, or be removed from the family name and its protection. He had given her $100 and a one-way ticket west. Eleanor clutched the reticule in her lap. The $100 was still there, minus the cost of this grueling passage. She was fleeing a prison of silk and expectation, only to arrive in a wilderness she could not possibly comprehend. Her goal was not wealth. She had seen what the obsession with wealth did to men like her father. Her goal was simpler and far more desperate. She wanted freedom. She wanted to own her own soul. She wanted the dignity of a life she had chosen, however harsh. The coach hit a rut, throwing her hard against the worn leather seat. The man opposite her, a whiskey-soaked drummer in a stained suit, grunted in his sleep. She was arriving in Dusthaven with nothing but a name she no longer felt entitled to, and a reputation. She was sure. That had preceded her, a difficult, disobedient woman. In the East, it was a social death. Here, in the West, she prayed it might simply mean she was strong enough to survive. Dusthaven announced itself not as a town, but as an interruption, a raw collection of pine buildings huddled along a single, wide street that seemed to perpetually dissolve into dust at either end. It lay in the shadow of the mountains, a fragile outpost of ambition and desperation. The stagecoach groaned to a halt in front of the Wells Fargo office, which shared a building with the saloon. As Eleanor gathered her meager belongings, bracing herself, the town assessed her. Sheriff Pike stood on the boardwalk in front of his office, a solid block of a man. His belly strained his waistcoat, and the badge pinned to it was the brightest thing about him. He chewed on a matchstick, his eyes flat as he watched Eleanor emerge from the coach. His gaze was proprietary, as if she were merely new livestock to be catalogued. Near him, leaning against a post, was a younger man. He was thinner than the sheriff, with the same dark hair but without the settled meanness in the eyes. This was Jonah Pike, the sheriff's brother. He wore a gun belt, but he wore it with a kind of reluctance. He was watching the mountains, not the stagecoach, his expression troubled, as if listening for a sound only he could hear. A woman stepped out of the small building next to the assay office. The sign above her door, painted in neat green letters, read Dr. Mercy Quinlan, physician. She was Irish, with red hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face etched with a weariness that went beyond her years. She watched Eleanor step down, noted the fine, impractical boots now covered in grime, and the terror the young woman was trying to hide behind a mask of propriety. Dr. Mercy Quinlan sighed. She was the town's conscience, a thankless job in a place that valued gold above grace. Eleanor took her first breath of Dusthaven air. It smelled of horses, lye soap, stale beer, and the pervasive, inescapable dust. This was it, the place where she would start again. She did not know, could not know, that her rejected suitor's family, the Mallorys, were the unseen kings of this dusty patch of ground. She did not know that her arrival was a ripple that would soon meet the wave of violence Silas Crow was preparing. And she did not know that high in the hills, a lone Apache warrior named Ash had just declared a quiet, personal war against the very forces that had pushed Eleanor into exile. The sun was setting. The sky was a riot of orange and purple. In the growing twilight, the first coyote called, a lonely sound that defined the vastness of the land. In the town, lamps were lit, casting yellow squares onto the street. Far off, the hammering of the railroad line continued its relentless march, a sound like a clock ticking down. The stage was set. The players were in place. The conflict, rooted in the ambiguous laws of men and the ancient claims of the earth, was about to begin. The stagecoach was still 5 miles from Dusthaven when the world exploded. It was in the narrow part of the pass, where the red rock walls rose high on either side, and the twilight was gathering thick as wool. Eleanor Whitcomb was bracing for the jolt of the next pothole when the first rifle shot cracked the air. It was sharper, louder than anything she had ever heard. Wood splintered next to her head. The driver, a heavy man named Jed, screamed a curse. The shotgun guard sitting beside him, a younger man with a thin mustache, returned fire with a blast that rocked the coach. "Get down, ma'am," the guard yelled, fumbling to reload. Horses screamed. The coach lurched, then skidded to a violent stop, throwing Eleanor from her seat onto the floor. Outside, men were shouting. The box and the lady's luggage, find the map. Map, Eleanor thought, her heart hammering against her ribs. She scrambled to her knees. Another volley of shots. The guard above grunted. A wet, final sound. Jed, the driver, was shouting, I'm hit, we surrender!" The coach door was ripped open. A man stood silhouetted against the dying light. He smelled of sweat, whiskey, and gunpowder. He had a scarred face and eyes like chips of obsidian. "Get out!" he snarled. He grabbed her arm and hauled her from the coach, throwing her onto the rocky ground. She landed hard. The breath knocked from her. "Tear it apart!" the scarred man yelled to his companions, who were already cutting the straps on her trunks. Another man held a pistol to Jed, who was slumped on the driver's box, clutching his shoulder. A third man was motionless on the ground, the shotgun guard. "Where is it?" the scarred man growled, looming over Eleanor. "The geological survey, the map." I do not know what you mean," she stammered, pushing herself backward, the sharp gravel cutting into her palms. "Liar!" He raised his hand to strike her. An arrow appeared in his throat. It made no sound. The man stopped, his eyes wide with surprise. He gurgled, clawing at the shaft, and pitched forward, collapsing not 2 feet from her. For a second, there was absolute silence. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "What in the—" one of the other men started, whirling around. Rifle raised, a shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom of the rocks above them. A second man cried out, a short, sharp sound that was cut off instantly. The third man, the one guarding the driver, fired his rifle into the darkness. A figure moved, impossibly fast. It was on him. Eleanor saw a flash of steel, a blur of motion. The man fell backward over the carriage tongue. Silence returned. It was deeper, heavier now. Jed, the driver, was moaning from his perch. Oh, Lord! Oh, Lord!" Eleanor was frozen, staring at the man who had been about to hit her. The arrow was fletched with dark feathers. Someone stepped into the faint light from the coach lamps. The figure was slight, dressed in buckskin leggings and a loose cotton shirt. Long, black hair was tied back. The person knelt by the man Eleanor had thought was dead. No, not dead. The man was groaning, clutching a leg wound. The figure rose and turned. It was a woman. Her face was stark, her cheekbones high, her eyes dark and unreadable. She held a knife in one hand and a bow in the other. She looked at Eleanor, then at the wounded driver, then at the chaos of the ambush. Ayanna. Ash Kai had been tracking the last of the black vultures back toward the town when she heard the gunfire. She had expected them to hole up, not to strike a public coach. They had grown bold, or desperate. She moved to the back of the coach, her eyes scanning the ground. Trunks had been broken open. Dresses, books, and personal effects were scattered in the dust. Her gaze fell on a small, leather satchel that had been tossed aside. It was embossed with a family crest, pressed into the leather. Ash knelt. She had seen that crest before. Impressed in wax on documents carried by the surveyors she had chased from the valley. The Whitcomb family seal. It was identical, save for the name, to the seal used by Baron Henry Mallory. Her eyes hardened. She looked up at Eleanor, who was now trying to get to her feet, her fine traveling suit ripped and covered in dust. This woman was not a victim. She was a message, a player. She was part of the sickness. "Please," Eleanor whispered, her voice shaking. "The driver, he is hurt." Ash gave a curt nod. She slipped her knife back into its sheath. She climbed the coach and examined Jed. The bullet was in his shoulder. He was bleeding, but he would live if he did not bleed out first. She grabbed a fistful of linen from one of the broken trunks, Eleanor's fine underthings, and pressed it hard into the wound. "Hold this," she commanded. "Hard." Jed whimpered and obeyed. Ash jumped down. She looked at the wounded vulture on the ground. He was conscious, glaring at her with hatred. "Silas will kill you for this," he spat. "Silas sent you to die," Ash replied, her voice low and flat. She turned her back on him and walked to Eleanor. Eleanor stood her ground, though every instinct told her to run. This woman was more dangerous than the men she had just killed or wounded. There was a finality to her, an economy of motion that was terrifying. "Who are you?" Eleanor asked again. "Get in the coach," Ash said. "But—" "Get in. You will drive. I will ride on top." I cannot drive a team of 6. Eleanor protested, the absurdity of the demand hitting her. Ash stared at her for a long moment. She saw the fine, soft hands, the expensive clothes, but she also saw the terror in the woman's eyes had not made her hysterical. She had not screamed. She had not fainted. She was still standing. It was a different kind of courage than Ash was used to, but it was courage nonetheless. "I will handle the team," Ash said. She grabbed the wounded vulture, disarmed him, and tied his hands with a length of rope from the wreckage. She tied his feet. She left him on the side of the road. He would be found, or he would not. That was his fate. She cut the dead shotgun guard loose. She moved him to the side of the road and covered him with a blanket. She did it with a respect that startled Eleanor. Then, Ash climbed onto the driver's box. She pulled the wounded Jed from the seat and laid him as gently as she could inside the coach, next to Eleanor. "Look after him," Ash ordered. She took the reins. The horses were spooked, tangled in their harnesses. Ash spoke to them in Apache, her voice calm and low, a song of reassurance. The lead horse quieted, then the others. She expertly untangled the lines, her hands moving with deft certainty in the gloom. "Hold on," she called down. She cracked the whip, and the heavy coach lurched into motion. They rode the last 5 miles in a heavy, jouncing silence, broken only by the moans of the driver. Eleanor sat in the dark, the smell of blood filling the cabin, her mind racing. The seal, the map, this warrior woman. Ash did not drive them to the main street. She took a side alley, pulling the team up in the darkness behind Dr. Mercy Quinlan's clinic. She jumped down and banged on the back door. Light spilled out as the door opened. Dr. Mercy stood there, her red hair escaping its bun, a shawl clutched around her nightdress. "Saints preserve us," she whispered, taking in the shot-up coach, the Apache warrior, and the blood. "He is shot," Ash said, indicating Jed. "He needs you." Together, they hauled the heavy driver inside and onto the operating table. Mercy's hands were immediately at work, cutting away the bloody shirt, her face grim. Ash turned to leave. She had delivered the wounded. Her part was done. This white woman, this Eleanor Whitcomb, was a complication she did not need. Let the doctor handle her. "Wait." Eleanor scrambled out of the coach, stumbling, her ankle twisting. She caught herself on the doorframe. "Please, you saved my life. I must thank you." Ash paused, her back to her. "Who are you?" Eleanor said, desperation in her voice. "What were they looking for?" Ash turned slowly. Her eyes met Eleanor's. The suspicion was cold and clear. "They were looking for what you brought." "I brought nothing. I am. I was You are a Whitcomb, Ash said. It was not a question. Your seal is the same as the Baron's. You are his back door. No, Eleanor cried, stung. You do not understand. I was cast out. I refused to marry his nephew. My family, they are connected to him. Yes, but I am not. I ran from them. Ash watched her, her expression unmoving. She did not know if this was a lie, but it was a complex one. I owe you my life, Eleanor said, taking a step forward. My name is Eleanor Whitcomb. I have nowhere to go. You came to the wrong place, Ash said. She looked at Dr. Mercy. She is your problem now. Ash melted back into the night, vanishing as if she had never been there. Dr. Mercy finished stitching Jed's shoulder and looked at the pale, exhausted, and utterly ruined young woman standing in her clinic. Well, the doctor said, in her thick Irish brogue. She's not wrong. You've brought trouble. Miss Whitcomb, serious trouble. The next morning, Sheriff Pike arrived. He spent 2 minutes looking at the coach, 2 minutes talking to Jed, who was weak and on laudanum, and 30 seconds questioning Eleanor. His report would list it as an attempted robbery by unknown persons. He did not seem interested in the dead shotgun guard, or the arrow left in the dead robber's throat. The town, however, was very interested. The whispers started in the general store and moved to the saloon by noon. The new lady from the east, the one with all the trunks, attacked before she even set foot in town, and the gold Apache involved. She's trouble, the blacksmith said, spitting tobacco. Brings her rich folks' wars out here. The saloon keeper agreed. Nothing good will come of it. Eleanor, given a small cot in Mercy's storage room, heard the whispers through the thin walls. She was a pariah before she had even unpacked. Her family's name, the one she had tried to escape, had followed her, and the only person who had saved her, the fierce Apache woman, now believed she was an enemy. Where, she thought, clutching the small valise she had managed to keep hidden, does loyalty lie? Her family had abandoned her. This new land was hostile, and the woman who had saved her was protecting that land from her. Dr. Mercy Quinlan cleaned the last of the gravel from Eleanor's palms. The silence in the small clinic was thick, broken only by the sound of the driver. Jed, muttering in his laudanum-fueled sleep in the next room. It had been nearly 24 hours since the ambush. You said they were looking for a map, Mercy said, her voice quiet but firm as she applied a salve. Eleanor flinched, but not from the sting of the medicine. She had spent the night on a narrow cot in the storage room, listening to the sounds of the strange town, her mind replaying the horror of the attack, the sight of the arrow, and the cold, accusing eyes of the Apache woman. They mentioned a survey, Eleanor said, hedging. Mercy stopped her work and looked Eleanor square in the face. Miss Whitcomb, that warrior woman who saved you, Ash, she thinks you are in league with Baron Mallory. The sheriff here is, to put it kindly, a compromised man. You are sitting in the middle of a hornet's nest, and I am the only one who does not have a reason to sting you. Yet, I need the truth. Eleanor looked at the Irish woman's exhausted, honest face. She saw no judgment there, only a profound weariness. Eleanor finally broke. The mask of the Eastern lady shattered. I am here because I refused to marry Arthur Mallory, Eleanor whispered, the confession rushing out of her. The Baron's nephew, my father arranged it. When I refused, he called me a fool. He said I was disowned. He gave me money and told me to disappear. So you came west, Mercy concluded. Not just to disappear, to start over, to be my own person. Eleanor bit her lip, the guilt rising. And I stole something before I left. She rose from the stool and went to the small, muddy valise she had managed to save from the coach. She opened it, beneath a change of clothes and her mother's silver hairbrush. She retrieved a rolled oilcloth tube. "I took this from my father's study," she said, her hands shaking as she untied it. "I overheard him talking to one of Mallory's men. They were angry. They said the survey team had been chased off by the wildfire people. My father was furious. He said the delay was unacceptable." She spread the document on Mercy's examination table. It was not the original survey, but a meticulously drawn copy. Eleanor had spent 2 nights locked in her room, transcribing every line by candlelight. "I do not know what I thought," Eleanor said, shame coloring her cheeks. "I thought it was my inheritance. If they valued it so much, I could use it, find my own way, stake an honest claim. I never considered." Dr. Mercy leaned closer, her sharp eyes tracing the lines. The map was detailed, showing the canyons and creeks running from the Mogollon Rim. And there, following the precise path of the sacred valley, was a thick, shaded line marked in red ink. Firebird Vein. "Saints preserve us," Mercy whispered. "Do you know what this is, child?" "It is a gold strike." Eleanor said, "It is a sacrilege." Mercy corrected, her voice hardening. "This is the Firebird Valley. It is the heart of the wildfire people. It is their church. And your family, Miss Whitcomb, just drew a map for its defilement." Eleanor recoiled as if struck. "My father, he only spoke of it as land, unclaimed territory. He said it was vital for the new railroad spur. A railroad spur that, by pure coincidence, runs directly over the largest gold deposit in the territory," Mercy said dryly. "This map is not a survey. It is a theft order. This is what they tried to kill you for. And this," she tapped the paper, "is what that woman, Ash, is sworn to protect." The weight of her family's sin settled on Eleanor. She was not just an exile. She was the carrier of the plague. The documents her father had used, the ones she had copied, were the tools Mallory was using to pressure the government, to erase an entire people. Her dream of an honest life was built on a stolen map. High in the hills, Ash watched the sunrise paint the cliffs. She had not slept. The Whitcomb seal, the brazenness of the attack, the stakes driven into the valley floor, it was a pattern, and it was closing in. She met Taza, a young warrior whose brother had been killed in a raid by soldiers 2 seasons prior, near the Dry Fork. His anger was still hot. 3 of them, Ash told him. "Black vultures. They hit the stagecoach. I stopped them." "You stopped 3? Taza said, his hand tightening on the lance he carried. "Silas Crow has 20, 30. They drive stakes in our valley. They attack their own wagons for paper. And we watch." "We watch," a new voice said. It was Nahastzan, the elder woman, who held the ceremonies. She walked toward them, her steps slow but sure, her face a map of seasons. "You see the vulture, Taza. You do not see the baron who feeds him. You cannot fight a bank in the east with a lance." "So we do nothing," Taza demanded. "We let them take our land." "Ayana," Nahastzan said, turning to Ash, ignoring the young man's outburst. "The white woman, the one you pulled from the fire." "She is one of them," Ash said flatly. "Her name is Whitcomb. She carries the Mallory seal." "Perhaps," the old woman said, looking down toward the smudge of Dust Haven. "Or perhaps she is a stone he kicked loose, and it has rolled into our path. You said they tried to kill her. The snake does not bite its own tail unless it is trapped. You must be patient. You must use strategy. You cannot fight their bullets with arrows, or their paper with anger. You must fight their paper with truth. Watch the woman. She is the key. She is either the lock or she is the hammer that will break it." Ash respected the elder's wisdom, but the patience chafed. She wanted to protect her home. She did not want to be a nursemaid to a rich white woman who was almost certainly a spy. Down in Dust Haven, Jonah Pike nursed a lukewarm coffee in the saloon. He was supposed to be sweeping the boardwalk in front of his brother's office, a demeaning task the sheriff assigned him whenever he was displeased. Jonah was displeased more often than not. He watched his brother, Sheriff Pike, talking to two men by the assayer's office. The men were dressed like prospectors, their clothes dusty, their beards untrimmed. But they wore their guns low, tied down, and their eyes were not the hopeful, frantic eyes of men seeking a fortune. They were the dead, flat eyes of men who took it. Jonah knew them. He had seen their faces on a flyer in Prescott. They were part of Silas Crow's Black Vultures. He pushed himself away from the table and walked outside, his boots heavy on the boards. "Sheriff," Jonah said, his voice quiet. Pike turned, his irritation obvious. "What is it?" "Jonah, I am busy." "Those men," Jonah said, nodding toward the two, who had stopped talking and were now watching him. "They are vultures. That one is called Lefty Alvarez, wanted for a bank robbery in Tucson." The sheriff's face darkened. He stepped close to Jonah, blocking him from the men's view. "Those men," he hissed, "are employees of the Mogollon Land and Rail Company. They are scouts. You're seeing ghosts. Now go sweep the walk before I throw you in a cell to dry out." "I am not drunk." "Pike," Jonah said, the familiar shame mixing with a new, cold anger. "Then you are a fool. Mind your business." The sheriff turned his back on him and rejoined the men, laughing at something one of them said. Jonah stood there, his hand near the butt of his gun. He looked across the street. The two scouts were watching the doctor's clinic. They were not looking at the mountains. They were not looking for gold. They were watching the woman. His brother was not just lazy or bought. He was complicit. He was part of it. The rumor started an hour later, originating from the very men Jonah had recognized. It moved through the town like a grass fire. "Heard the sheriff is forming a posse," the blacksmith said. "What for?" "That gold Apache, the one who hit the stage. Heard she did not just kill the robbers. She took the lady from the east, kidnapped her, dragging her up to the hills." "Why?" "Ransom, maybe. Or maybe she is just a savage. Pike is getting men to go in and get her back." Dr. Mercy heard the rumor when she went to the general store for laudanum. She ran back to the clinic, her face pale. "They are twisting it," she told Eleanor, locking the front door. "They are painting Ash as the criminal. The sheriff is using the attack as an excuse to hunt her. And those men, the vultures, they are in town, disguised. They are watching this building." Eleanor's blood ran cold. They will come for me." "They will come for the map," Mercy stated. "And they will not leave you as a witness. You cannot stay here. Pike will not protect you. He will hand you over." "Where can I go?" Eleanor cried, the panic she had held at bay finally rising. "I have nowhere." "Yes, you do," Mercy said, already grabbing her coat and a medical bag. "You have one protector, the only one they truly fear." Mercy met Ash at twilight, at a small spring a mile north of town that only she and the Apache knew about. Ash emerged from the rocks like a ghost. "They are moving against you," Mercy said, without preamble. "The sheriff is forming a posse. He is telling the town you kidnapped the Whitcomb woman." Ash's expression did not change, but her eyes hardened. "It is a lie." "Of course it is. It is a pretext. His vulture friends are in town, watching my clinic. They mean to take her, and the map she carries." "She has it?" Ash asked, her voice sharp. "She has a copy," Mercy confirmed. "A hand-drawn copy. She stole it from her father. She confessed everything. Ash, she is not your enemy. She is just a fool who stepped in a bear trap set by her own family." Ash processed this. The elder's words came back to her. "She is the key. This woman is a target." Mercy pressed. "You need her proof. She needs your protection. You both want the same thing, to stop Mallory." Ash was silent for a long time. She hated this. She hated the town, its lies, and its complexities. But she knew the doctor was right. If the sheriff took Eleanor, the map would go to Mallory, and the last justification for peace would be gone. "Midnight," Ash said. "The dry fork of the creek. Bring her, and the map." "She will be there," Mercy promised. "And Mercy," Ash added. "Tell her to lose the shoes. She cannot make noise." When Mercy returned and told Eleanor the plan, Eleanor looked at her worn, useless leather boots. She would have to go barefoot, into the wilderness, with a woman who despised her. "It is all right, child," Mercy said, packing a small bundle of food and a canteen. "This is a terrible land for fine things." As darkness enveloped Dust Haven, Eleanor looked at the map one last time. The red line of the Firebird vein seemed to throb in the lamplight. "It is not just a fight for land, is it, Doctor?" Eleanor asked. Mercy Quinlan looked at the determined, terrified young woman. "No, Miss Whitcomb, it is not. It is a race. A race to find enough truth to stop the liars before they burn us all down. And you, God help you, are now running in it." The dry wash was a ribbon of blackness in the starlight. Eleanor stumbled, a sharp stone driving into the soft arch of her foot. She stifled a gasp, biting down hard on her lip. She had left her ruined boots at Dr. Mercy's clinic. She was walking in her stocking feet, which had shredded to rags within the first 500 yards. Ash, moving 10 feet ahead of her, paused. She did not turn around. "You are making noise." "I am sorry," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling from the cold and the pain. "My feet—" "We do not have time for your feet," Ash said, her voice flat, devoid of sympathy. She turned then, and her eyes seemed to absorb the scant light, holding only shadow. "Dr. Mercy trusts you. I do not, but you carry the paper, and the men who want the paper are the men who drove stakes into my land. So for now, we walk, step where I step, on the rock, not the gravel. Do not speak again." Eleanor nodded, tears of frustration and agony stinging her eyes. She felt like a child, incompetent and soft. She watched the Apache woman move, a phantom who flowed over the broken ground without a single sound. Eleanor tried to emulate her, placing her bruised feet exactly where Ash had placed hers. The pain became a dull, roaring fire, a thing she carried with her. They climbed, for hours. They moved up the side of the canyon, away from the town, deep into the high country that the wildfire people called home. Ash moved with a relentless, economic pace, never slowing, never resting, until they reached a high promontory of rock overlooking the vast, sleeping valley. Ash stopped and knelt behind a screen of yucca. "They were here," she whispered. Eleanor crawled forward, collapsing onto the rock, her chest heaving. The stakes!" "I pulled those," Ash said. "They were sloppy. A warning. This is different." Ash led her another 20 yards, to a place where the rock was fissured. She pointed into a narrow crack. "There!" Eleanor peered down. At first, she saw nothing. Then, the starlight caught a thin line of metal. It was not a wooden stake, but a thin iron rod, hammered deep into the rock itself. It was a geological marker, a drill site. Ash took a flint and steel from her pouch. She struck a spark to a piece of dried tinder, cupping the small flame in her hands. She held it near the iron rod. Scratched into the metal, just below the head, was a symbol. It was an eagle, its wings spread, clutching a length of railroad track. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. It was the Mallory crest, the same symbol embossed on her father's stationery, the same one she had seen on the vulture's horse blankets. "Your family," Ash said, her voice a low accusation. She smothered the flame. "They are not just surveying. They are drilling. They are tasting the rock. Here." "I did not know," Eleanor whispered, her hand rising to her mouth. "I swear to you, I did not know it was this real." It has always been real, Ash said. She stood up, sniffing the air. The wind had stopped. The silence of the high desert was absolute, heavy, as if the sky were holding its breath. "What is it?" Eleanor asked, sensing the change in the warrior. "The air is sick," Ash said. She looked southwest. The stars were gone, swallowed by a bank of blackness that was moving toward them, not as clouds, but as a solid wall. "A storm, a fast one. We must go." "Go where?" "Down. The arroyo is the fastest way." Ash half pulled, half dragged Eleanor back down the slope. The first drop of rain, cold and heavy as a bullet, struck Eleanor's cheek, then another. Within a minute, the sky tore open. It was not rain, but a deluge. The wind howled, a physical force that shoved them against the rocks. "This way," Ash yelled over the roar, pulling Eleanor into a narrow, dry creek bed. The gravel and sand were already turning dark with water. "Is this safe?" Eleanor shouted, slipping on the wet stones. "It is the fastest we must get below the ridgeline." They ran, scrambling down the twisting cut. The water was at their ankles, then their knees. It was not just rain, it was a torrent. The entire drainage of the high mesa funneling into this single, narrow channel. Eleanor heard it before she saw it, a low, grinding roar that sounded like the earth ripping apart. Ash stopped, her head snapping up. Her eyes went wide with genuine fear. "Up, climb now." She shoved Eleanor toward the steep sandstone wall of the arroyo. "Climb!" Eleanor clawed at the slick rock, her bleeding feet finding no purchase. "I cannot." "Dago," Ash commanded, using a word Eleanor did not know but understood perfectly. The Apache woman put her hands on Eleanor's back and literally threw her upward onto a narrow ledge 3 feet up. Ash scrambled to join her just as the wall of water hit. It was a solid mass of mud, boulders, and ripped-up trees. It struck the opposite bank with the force of a locomotive, sending a plume of spray and debris over them. The arroyo, which minutes before had been dry sand, was now a 30-foot-deep river of churning, murderous mud. They clung to the ledge, soaked to the bone in an instant, the cold seeping into their marrow. Eleanor stared at the torrent below, her mind numb. They were trapped, marooned on a tiny island of rock, 6 inches from death. She began to shake, the terror and the cold combining in a violent, uncontrollable tremor. It is just like my father's study." Eleanor stammered, her teeth chattering so hard she could barely speak. Ash looked at her, baffled. "What?" His anger, it is just like this. It comes from nowhere. It sweeps everything away. And you just have to hold on and pray you do not get washed away." She let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "I seem to have lost everything else. My dignity, my family, my money, my shoes. It is almost funny." Ash stared at her, at this pale, soft woman who had just faced death, who was bleeding and freezing, and who was making a joke. A dry, unfamiliar sound left Ash's throat. It was a short, sharp huff. It took Eleanor a moment to realize the Apache woman was laughing. It was a rough, rusty sound, as if the mechanism were seldom used, but it was a laugh. Eleanor, startled, found herself smiling back, a genuine, watery smile. The chasm between them had, for a moment, been bridged by the shared absurdity of survival. The next morning, Dust Haven was a sea of mud. Dr. Mercy Quinlan, having slept for 2 hours in her chair, was inventorying her supplies when the word spread. Baron Mallory was in town. He had not arrived on the stage, but in a private, well-sprung carriage, accompanied by 4 guards in dark suits who looked more like bankers than gunmen. He took the best rooms at the hotel, and by 10 o'clock, he was on the balcony, addressing the small crowd of merchants and ranchers who had gathered. He was handsome, in a severe Eastern way. He wore a gray suit, a silk vest, and an air of absolute authority. "Gentlemen of Dusthaven," he began, his voice projecting easily. "I am Henry Mallory. You know my name. You see my railroad. I am here to tell you that the future you have been promised is arriving." He spoke of jobs. He spoke of prosperity. He spoke of a spur line that would run from Dusthaven north, connecting their isolated town to the main artery of the nation. "We are building a nation," he declared, "and this valley is the next great step." Sheriff Pike stood below the balcony, his arms crossed, his thumbs hooked in his gun belt. He scanned the crowd, his eyes daring anyone to challenge the Baron. A rancher named Calloway, whose land bordered the reservation line, cleared his throat. "Mr. Mallory, what about the treaty? That land you are talking about, that is Apache land, sacred land." Mallory smiled, a thin, dismissive expression. "We respect all legal treaties. Mr. Calloway, my surveyors are on public land, designated for railroad expansion by the United States government. We are bringing order. We are bringing jobs." "Your surveyors look more like gunmen to me," another man called out. Sheriff Pike moved instantly. He shoved the man hard against a post. "You will show Mr. Mallory respect. He is a guest in this town. Anyone who disrupts this progress is an enemy of this town." The crowd grew silent. The message was clear. The law and the railroad were one. In her clinic, Mercy Quinlan felt a chill. Surveyors. She pulled out her medical ledger. She flipped back 3 weeks. A man named Smith. Occupation railroad camp. Injury bullet wound. Superficial right arm. 2 weeks ago, Jones. Occupation surveyor. Injury broken knuckle, right hand. 4 days ago, Brown. Occupation land scout. Injury knife wound, abdomen. She had patched up 3 of Silas Crow's men. And they had all, she realized with a jolt, paid her in new, crisp $20 bills, Mallory's money. The line of power was stark and clear. Mallory paid Pike. Pike protected Crow. Crow's men did the dirty work, labeled as railroad employees. She slammed the ledger shut. High in the rocks, in a small, dry cave where they had taken shelter, Ash and Eleanor watched the storm recede. The sun was setting, and the sky, washed clean, was a brilliant, flawless turquoise. "We must wait for full dark," Ash said. She was tending to Eleanor's feet. She had gathered yucca leaves, chewed the root into a poultice, and was applying it to the deep cuts. Her touch was surprisingly gentle, her movements economical and precise. "Thank you," Eleanor murmured. I have never been so useless." "You are alive," Ash said. "That is not useless. Now, be still." As night fell, the stars emerged with a brilliance Eleanor had never seen. The Milky Way was a vast, glittering river of light, so bright it seemed to cast its own shadow. "It is beautiful," Eleanor whispered. "Nahat Zan, our elder, says the stars only shine when the night is at its darkest," Ash said quietly. "She says they are the campfires of the ancestors, reminding us not to be afraid of the dark." A soft sound broke the stillness, a low whistle, like a canyon wren. Ash was on her feet instantly, her bow in her hand. An arrow knocked. She moved to the mouth of the cave. "Who is there?" A figure stepped out from the rocks, his hands raised. "It is me, Jonah Pike. Please do not shoot." Ash held her aim. "Little brother of the snake, what do you want?" Jonah was breathing hard. He had clearly run from the town. I heard my brother. He was talking to Mallory. They are not waiting. They know the posse is a lie. They are sending Silas Crow into the valley tonight. To clear it. To provoke you." "Provoke us into what?" Ash said, her voice cold. "A fight. Jonah said desperately. So the soldiers at the fort have an excuse to come, so Mallory can declare the land hostile territory and take it, and he has the weapons to do it. He fumbled in his coat. I work at the freight depot sometimes. Loading. A shipment came in this afternoon, marked mining supplies. My brother told me to move it, not to look, but I looked. He thrust a crumpled piece of paper at Ash. This is the manifest. It says drills and picks, but I opened a crate. Ash, it is rifles, Winchester repeaters, at least 100 of them, enough to start a war. Ash took the paper. She looked at Jonah's pale, earnest face. He will kill me if he knows I came here. Jonah said, but I cannot be part of this, not this. He turned and fled, disappearing back into the rocks. Ash and Eleanor were alone. Ash held the manifest. Eleanor held the map. The map is the why. Eleanor said, her voice gaining a strength Ash had not heard before. The manifest is the how. And Dr. Mercy's ledger, it connects the vultures to the railroad. It is proof. Eleanor looked at Ash, her eyes clear in the starlight. My father, he is a weak man. He lives by lies. I thought I hated him for it, but I just ran. You are facing them. She touched the raw wounds on her feet. I want to face them. With you. Ash looked at the map, then at the manifest. She thought of her brother, the one who had died. He had charged in with rage, with no proof. He had died for nothing. Nahastzan is right, Ash said, her voice quiet but filled with a new, cold resolve. We cannot win with blood, not their way. We must use their own paper against them. We will stop this war before it starts. We will use the truth. She looked at Eleanor. The suspicion was gone, replaced by a grudging, hard-won respect. You will have to walk again. Can you? Eleanor stood up, wincing as she put weight on her bandaged feet. She nodded. Step where you step. The freight depot smelled of stale coffee, metal, and coarse burlap. It was a long, low building squatting beside the new, raw-cut railroad ties. Jonah Pike held up his hand, listening. The only sound was the familiar, tinny piano from the saloon 2 streets over. He makes his last round at 10 o'clock. Jonah whispered. He knelt by the office door. Then he sits in the saloon until midnight. We have time, but not much. He took a thin piece of steel from his boot and worked the simple lock. It scraped, then clicked open. Ash did not wait. She slipped inside, a shadow moving through deeper shadows. Eleanor followed, her heart a cold hammer against her ribs, her bandaged feet, now shod in a pair of moccasins Mercy had given her, made no sound. Jonah entered last, closing the door behind them. The manifest ledger is on the main desk, he said. Ash was already there. She struck a single match, the flare of it making the small office leap into view. Stacks of paper, a telegraph key, a rack of rifles by the door. She lit a small kerosene lamp, turning the wick down so low it was just a smudge of orange light. That one. Jonah pointed, his hand shaking slightly. A thick, leather-bound book. Ash opened it. Page after page of cramped, spidery script. She could not read the words, but she could read the numbers and the symbols. She saw the Mallory eagle crest stamped again and again. What does it say? She asked Eleanor. Eleanor leaned close, her finger tracing the last entry. Shipped October 14th. Received October 27th. Contents 100 units. Mining equipment. Specialty drills. Signed for P. Pike. My brother, Jonah breathed, the shame thick in his voice. He signed for the rifles? Take the page, Ash commanded. I cannot, Eleanor said. It will show. He will know. Then he will know, Ash said. No, wait, Jonah said. He found a blank manifest, dipped a pen in the inkwell, and, with a surprisingly steady hand, began to copy the line item. His handwriting was a near-perfect match for the clerk's. "It is a risk, but better than a torn book." While he wrote, Ash moved through the rest of the office. She was not a reader, but she knew the look of important paper. She sifted through the stack of telegrams spiked on a spindle. Most were simple messages. One, however, was different. It was longer, with the official stamp of the Western Union main office in the east. She pulled it from the spike and handed it to Eleanor. "This one." Eleanor's blood ran cold as she read the typed words. It was from her father, Horace Whitcomb, addressed to Baron Henry Mallory, at the hotel in Dusthaven. It was not a letter. It was a weapon. "What?" Ash asked, watching her face pale. He has done it," Eleanor whispered. "He has signed it all away. He is granting Baron Mallory his full proxy, his authority, to negotiate the sale of all disputed territorial assets, in exchange for a 10% share in the railroad spur. He cites local instability as the reason to bypass a public hearing." "Local instability," Ash repeated, the words tasting like poison. "The instability he is paying for." "My father," Eleanor said, her voice breaking with a cold, final clarity. "He just gave Mallory the legal right to sell your valley, your home. He is a monster." She wanted to tear the paper into 1,000 pieces, to burn it, to erase her own name. She felt the stain of her bloodline, a deep, indelible shame that made her want to flee. The door latch clicked. Jonah dropped the pen, spattering ink across the desk. Ash smothered the lamp with her palm, plunging the room into total darkness. She drew her knife, its sound a soft shing against the leather sheath. The door swung open. Sheriff Pike stood silhouetted in the doorway, his heavy frame filling the space. He held a lantern in one hand and his pistol in the other. "I knew it," he slurred. He was drunk. "I knew I heard something. Rats in my depot." His lantern light swept the room. It caught Jonah, frozen by the desk. It caught Eleanor, pressed against the wall. It caught Ash, coiled in the corner, her knife low and ready. "Well, well, well," the sheriff sneered. "My little brother, the thief, and the runaway lady, and the savage." He spat the word. "What is this, a little party?" He saw the open ledger, the copied manifest, the telegram in Eleanor's hand. His drunken haze vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. "So that is it," Pike said. "You think you are clever. You think you can, show these to someone who the saloon keeper, the blacksmith. I am the law here." He raised his pistol, aiming it not at Ash, but at Eleanor. "And you, Missy, you are interfering with official railroad business. That makes you an accessory. Hand me the papers." "No," Eleanor said, her voice shaking but defiant. "Hand them to me," he roared. "Leave her alone, Pike," Jonah said. He stepped forward, placing himself between his brother and Eleanor. "Get out of the way, Jonah," the sheriff snarled. "You are a disgrace, a drunk and a traitor. I should have run you out of town years ago." "Yes," Jonah said, his voice quiet. "You probably should have." Pike cocked the hammer of his pistol. "Last time, boy, move." Jonah did not move. Instead, he drew his own revolver. He was not fast, but he was steady. He fired before his brother could react. The shot was deafening in the small room. It did not hit the sheriff. It hit the wall just beside his head, showering his face with wood splinters and plaster dust. Sheriff Pike screamed, dropping his lantern and firing his own gun wildly into the ceiling. The lantern shattered, oil and flame spilling across the floorboards. "Run!" Jonah yelled. Ash grabbed Eleanor's arm and pulled her through the door. They burst out into the night, running low, vanishing into the alleyway. Jonah backed out of the office, his gun still raised. the small fire beginning to lick at the spilled oil. "Jonah!" Pike bellowed, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. You shot at me! Your own blood!" "You are not my blood anymore," Jonah said. He dropped a $20 gold piece onto the boardwalk. "That is for the door. Put out your own fire, Sheriff." He turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness in a different direction. Ash and Eleanor did not stop running until they reached the back door of Dr. Mercy's clinic. They fell inside, barring the door, gasping for breath. Mercy was waiting, her face grim. "I heard the shot. The whole town heard it." "What happened?" "We have it," Eleanor panted, laying the copied manifest and the scorched telegram on the table. "We have the proof. Pike. He tried to. Jonah saved us." Mercy's eyes scanned the documents. This is it. The rifles, the signature, the proxy agreement." She looked up, her mind working fast. "The Mining Act of 1872. It is thin, but it is a start. It requires a public posting of any claim, and it respects prior local custom. We can argue the sacred status of the valley with this." She slapped the manifest. "We can argue criminal conspiracy. We can demand an injunction from the territorial marshal." "A trial," Eleanor said. "A public hearing," Mercy corrected. "We can stop the railroad, legally." A frantic pounding came at the door. Ash moved to it, her knife raised. "Who?" "It is Taza," a voice cried from outside, choked with panic. "Let me in." Mercy unbarred the door. The young Apache warrior stumbled in. He was bleeding from a cut on his cheek, his chest heaving. "They came," he gasped, looking at Ash, his eyes wild. "While you were gone, while the warriors were on the high patrol, Silas Crow, he rode into the camp. He did not fight. He... "Taza," Ash said, gripping his shoulders. "Breathe. Tell me." "He took Nahassan," Taza choked out. "He took the elder. He left this—" He held out a piece of tanned deer hide. Pinned to it, with one of Silas Crow's skinning knives, was a lock of the old woman's white hair. He says a trade," Taza said, his voice raw with hatred. "The old woman for the map, the real map, the one the gold Apache holds. He wants you, Ash, alone, at sunrise, at the place called Weaver's Needle. If you bring anyone, if you are late, he will send her back to us, in pieces." The room fell silent. The ticking of Mercy's clock sounded like hammer blows. Baron Mallory. He had remained at the hotel, clean, smiling, promising jobs. And while the town slept, his dog had just taken a hostage. Ash looked at the paper in her hand. The manifest, the telegram, all their proof. It was useless. "I will go," Ash said, her voice flat. "It is a life for a piece of paper. It is a fair trade." "No," Eleanor cried out. Ash turned on her, her eyes blazing with a cold fire Eleanor had never seen. "You do not understand. That is not just an old woman. She is our heart. She holds our stories. Without her, we are scattered. We are nothing. I will not let her die for a rock." "And you think he will let either of you live?" Eleanor shot back, stepping forward, her fear forgotten, replaced by a desperate, clarifying anger. "You think that man, Silas Crow, respects a trade he will take your map, and he will kill her, and he will kill you. That is not a trade. Ash, it is surrender." "It is my choice," Ash said, her hand moving to the map concealed in her waistband. "No," Eleanor said, grabbing her arm. The Apache woman could have thrown her across the room, but she did not. She just stood, rigid, as Eleanor clung to her. "You said we would use the truth. You cannot give up now. We save her with our wits, not by walking into his trap." "Wits," Taza spat from the corner. He has our elder. We need blood." "He wants blood," Eleanor insisted, her gaze locked on Ash. "He wants you to fight. He wants Taza to start a war, so the soldiers come. So Mallory can use my father's telegram. We will not give it to him. We will have the trial. We will have the public hearing." "It is too late for a hearing," Mercy said, her voice heavy. "We have no time." "We will make time," Eleanor said. "We do both. We need Nahastzan as a witness. We need her at the hearing. We do not trade for her. We rescue her." The sheer audacity of the plan hung in the air. Rescue the elder from Silas Crow's camp and hold a public trial. Ash stared at Eleanor. The fear, the softness, the eastern fragility. It was all gone. In its place was a woman made of prairie steel. The camp was silent, the warriors watching the fire, the tension a living thing. Ash and Eleanor stood apart, near the edge of the creek. "It is madness," Ash said, her voice low. "You are not a warrior. You cannot—" "I know what it is to be abandoned," Eleanor said, her voice just as low, the firelight catching the resolve in her eyes. "By family, by the law. I thought I hated my father, but I just ran away. You are facing them. I will not abandon that old woman, and I will not abandon you." She met Ash's dark gaze, unflinching. "I ran from the east. I thought I was running to freedom, but freedom is not just running from... It is running to... I choose this. I choose the west. She paused, the night air cold on her face. "And I choose you." Ash stood perfectly still. The declaration was a strange, powerful thing, a language she barely understood but felt in her bones. Her life had been one of obligation, of defense, of duty. This was choice. She could not say the words back. The shape of them was foreign to her mouth. So she did not speak. She simply held Eleanor's gaze, and the ice that had lived behind her eyes for a lifetime. The cold shield of the gold Apache finally broke. It was a promise, silent and absolute. The moon was high, a cold silver dollar pasted onto black velvet. It was a bad moon for a silent rescue, casting too much light, turning the rocks of the box canyon into sharp relief. Silas Crow's camp was below, accessible by a narrow game trail up the cliffs, or a wider horse path that crossed a rickety wooden bridge spanning a deep, black chasm. Ash, Taza, and 2 other warriors moved along the high trail, shadows merging with the juniper. Below, in the wash, Dr. Mercy Quinlan waited with the horses, her medical bag clutched in her lap. Eleanor was beside her. She wore one of Ash's spare buckskin shirts and a dark wool cloak Mercy had provided. Her role was simple, and it was terrifying. "He expects me," Ash had explained, her voice a dry whisper back at their camp. "He will be watching Weaver's Needle, the high rock for the gold Apache. He will be arrogant. He will keep the elder close to him, not with the main guard." The plan was twofold. Ash and Taza would handle the camp, a silent, coordinated attack to free Nahastzan. Eleanor's job was the diversion. "When you hear the coyote call, once," Ash had instructed, "you will ride the horse, the fast one, past the mouth of the bridge path. Do not stop, do not look back. Ride hard for the rendezvous. The guards at the bridge will see a woman, cloaked, riding away. They will think it is me, escaping. They will chase you." "And what if they catch me?" Eleanor had asked, her throat dry. "Do not let them catch you," Ash replied. Now, Eleanor waited, her hands holding the reins, numb. She was no longer the woman from the east. She was bait. A sound cut the night, a perfect, lonely coyote call. "That is it," Mercy whispered. "Godspeed, child." Eleanor kicked the horse. The animal sprang forward, grateful for the release of tension. She leaned low over its neck, the wind whipping the cloak behind her, and galloped past the dark canyon entrance, a fleeting shadow in the moonlight. From the darkness of the bridge path, a shout. "There she is! The squaw! She is running! Get her!" 3 riders burst from the shadows, firing their pistols into the air, chasing the decoy. At the same time, high above, Ash and Taza moved. The diversion had pulled 3 men. Silas, anticipating a trade, had kept only 2 at his main campfire. He was sitting on a log, oiling a rifle, when Ash dropped from the ledge above him. She landed without a sound. Before the first guard could even turn, Taza's knife was in his back. The second guard raised his rifle, but Ash was already on him, her own blade sliding under his ribs. It was brutal, efficient, and over in 4 seconds. Silas Crow stared, his rifle half assembled. He had been so sure of his trap, so focused on the high rock. "You!" he snarled, lunging not for a gun, but for the hostage. Nahastzan was tied to a pine tree, her face serene, her eyes watching the fire. "Move, and she dies," Silas hissed, pressing his skinning knife to the old woman's throat. "She dies, and you die," Ash said, her voice calm. She stood 20 feet away, her bow drawn, an arrow aimed at his heart. "You will not shoot," Silas mocked, a grin splitting his beard. "You will hit her. You do not have the nerve." "You do not know me very well," Ash replied. "Ayana," Nahastzan said, her voice quiet but strong. "Do not trade. The flame is here to test us." Silas, enraged by the distraction, raised his knife to strike, to silence her. In that instant, Ash did not shoot. She ran. She crossed the 20 feet of open ground in 3 strides. A blur of motion. Silas was strong, but his surprise made him slow. He tried to swing the knife from the elder to Ash, but she was already inside his guard. She did not strike him. She struck the ropes binding Nahazan, her heavy blade severing them in one clean slice. She shoved the old woman backward, into Taza's arms. "Get her out, go!" Now it was just Ash and Silas. Silas laughed, a low, guttural sound. He dropped the small knife and drew the heavy bowie from his belt. "Just you and me, Gold Apache. I've been waiting for this." He lunged. Ash did not meet his charge. She dodged, letting his momentum carry him past. She was faster, but he was a wall of muscle. He turned, swinging the heavy knife in a wide arc. Ash ducked under it, the wind of the blade ruffling her hair. She backed away, her movements fluid, luring him. She moved toward the narrow wooden bridge that spanned the canyon. It was the only way out, other than the cliffs. "Nowhere to run," Silas growled, advancing on her, sensing victory. The bridge was old, made of logs and rope, swaying slightly in the night breeze. Ash stepped onto it, her moccasins light. "You want the gold." "Silas," she called, retreating to the center of the span. "You want the map. It is right here." She tapped her belt. He charged onto the bridge. The structure groaned under his weight. He was halfway across when Ash stopped. She did not raise her knife to fight. She dropped to one knee, grabbed the thick rope railing, and sliced it. The rope snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The bridge, its support gone on one side, tilted violently. Silas roared, his arms windmilling as he lost his balance. He grabbed for the remaining rope, his fingers catching it. He hung there, suspended over the blackness of the canyon, 50 feet above the rocky creek bed. Ash stood on the solid bank, watching him. He glared up at her, his face a mask of pure hatred, his boots kicking at the empty air. "This is not over, bitch," he screamed, his voice echoing. "I will be back. I will kill you. And I will kill that eastern whore. I will burn your valley to the ground. I swear it." His fingers, slippery with sweat, began to lose their grip. He clawed at the rope, but his heavy frame was too much. "Mallory," he gasped, trying to pull himself up. "Mallory will—" His grip broke. He fell, his scream swallowed by the immense darkness of the canyon. Ash waited. She heard no impact. Far below, there was the faint sound of rushing water. The flash flood had left a deep pool at the bottom. He was gone, but she did not believe he was dead. Ayana. She turned. Taza was supporting Nahastzan. The old woman was weak, but smiling. "You have a good heart," the elder said, touching her arm. "But it is loud. It beats like a war drum. You must quiet it." She looked at Ash, then at the empty bridge. "The Firebird's flame will test your hearts. Both of them. The one of the earth and the one of the sky." Ash did not understand the riddle. "We must go. The others will be back." "Wait," Taza said. He was searching Silas's tent, kicking things aside in his anger. "Ash, look at this." He dragged a small, metal lockbox from under a pile of furs. It was locked. Ash smashed the simple mechanism with the butt of her knife. Inside was not gold, but paper, ledgers, and telegrams. She grabbed the most recent one. It was from the telegraph office in Dusthaven, sent 2 days ago. She handed it to Taza, who had learned to read English at the agency school. He squinted in the moonlight. "It is a wire from H.M., that is Mallory, to S.C. Silas Crow." "What does it say?" Ash demanded. "It says, payment confirmed. First deposit of $10,000 placed in Prescott account. For services rendered, proceed with final extraction. Land must be clear by the 30th. Ash took the paper. This was it. The money, the direct link, the date. Before any public hearing, before any legal approval, this was the bullet. "We have it all," Ash said. They met Mercy and Eleanor at the rendezvous. Eleanor was pale, her horse lathered, but she was safe. The vultures, hearing the fight, had given up the chase to return to their camp, finding it routed. "He is gone," Ash told Eleanor. "Silas, he fell." "Dead?" Eleanor asked. "I do not know." Ash said, "It does not matter. We have this." She showed her the new telegram. They rode back to Dusthaven as the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky. The town was quiet when they reached the back of Mercy's clinic, but it was a heavy, watchful quiet. "Lock the door," Mercy said, helping Nahazan onto the examination table. "I will make her some tea. We can rest for an hour." "No," Ash said. "It is too late for that." The sound of heavy boots on the boardwalk confirmed it. A loud, official hammering on the front door. "Dr. Mercy Quinlan, open this door in the name of the law." It was Sheriff Pike. "Do not open it," Eleanor whispered, clutching the telegrams. "He will break it down," Mercy said, her face pale. "It does not matter," Ash said. "We are done hiding." She walked to the front door and unbarred it. Sheriff Pike stood there, his face red from drink and lack of sleep, his pistol drawn. Behind him were 6 men, armed with rifles. 3 were vultures, now wearing deputy badges. 3 were townsfolk, their faces uncertain. Calloway, the rancher, was there, but he was standing apart from the others, his arms crossed, watching. "Well, well," Pike sneered, his eyes finding Ash. "The Gold Apache, you are under arrest for kidnapping, for the murder of 3 men on the stage line." "I am Ayana Kai," Ash said, her voice clear and carrying into the morning air. "And I did not kidnap anyone." "Where is she?" Pike demanded, shoving past Ash. He saw Eleanor standing by the table, holding the papers. "Miss Whitcomb, you are safe. I am here to rescue you." He grabbed her arm. This savage, has she harmed you?" "Let go of me, Sheriff," Eleanor said, her voice shaking but cold. "You are confused, ma'am," Pike said, his grip tightening. "You have been with them too long. You are coming with me, for your own protection." "She is not going anywhere," Dr. Mercy said, stepping forward, her Irish temper flaring. And you, Pike, are a disgrace to that badge." "That is enough," Pike roared. He dragged Eleanor toward the door, shoving her into the street. "She is a spy, a traitor. She has been consorting with the Indians, plotting against this town." A small crowd was gathering. The saloon keeper, the blacksmith, their faces were hostile, looking at Eleanor with suspicion. "Is that right? Sheriff Calloway called out, his voice a skeptical drawl. "Looks more like you are manhandling a lady." "She is no lady," one of the Vulture deputies shouted. "She is in league with them. They are trying to stop the railroad. They are trying to steal our jobs." The crowd divided. The merchants and saloon men, who depended on the railroad money, muttered their agreement. But Calloway and 2 other ranchers moved to stand with him. "I am not so sure I like this." "Pike," Calloway said, "Mallory wants that spur line, but he also filed papers for the water rights along the creek. All of them. That spur line is going to dry us out. Maybe this lady has a point." The standoff was absolute. Pike held Eleanor, his gun now pressed to her side. His men faced Calloway's ranchers. Into this silence, Ash walked. She stepped out of the clinic, onto the boardwalk, into the full morning light. She was not a shadow. She was not a ghost. She held her bow in her hand, but it was not raised. Hassan walked beside her, supported by Taza and Mercy. "Sheriff Pike," Ash said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the tension like a knife. "You are looking for the gold Apache." The street went silent. All eyes turned to her. "I am Ayanna Kay, of the Wildfire people," she said, her voice ringing with an authority the town had never heard from one of her people. "And I am the one you call the gold Apache. I am the one who guards the Firebird Valley, and I am the one who accuses you." Pike laughed, a nervous, ugly sound. "Accuse me you are a wanted murderer, and you are a paid conspirator," Eleanor cried, wrenching her arm from his grasp. She held up the papers. "I have the proof, I have the manifest for the rifles, I have the telegrams from Baron Mallory, I have the payment order to Silas Crow." The name Silas Crow hit the crowd. Pike's face went white. "This is a public matter," Dr. Mercy shouted, her voice carrying, "It is not for a corrupt sheriff to decide with a gun. It is for the town." Pike raised his pistol, his eyes wild. He aimed it at Ash. "This ends now. You are all under arrest." Before he could fire, before anyone could move, a sound, deep and resonant, rolled over the town. Bung! 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 It was the church bell. Everyone turned. Jonah Pike was standing in the church doorway, his hand on the bell rope. "Heard there was to be a public meeting," Jonah called out, his voice clear and sober. "About the railroad, about the land. The meeting is starting, and it seems we have our first witnesses." The clang of the church bell was a judgment. It echoed off the false fronts of the saloons and the high walls of the canyon, calling every citizen of Dust Haven to account. Sheriff Pike, his face a mottled purple, found himself trapped. He was a man of brute force, but the bell was a symbol of a different power. He could not shoot a bell. He could not arrest a congregation, hemmed in by Calloway's ranchers on one side and the cold, watching eyes of the townsfolk on the other. He was herded, along with his Vulture deputies, toward the church. Baron Henry Mallory and his lawyer entered last. Mallory moved with an air of profound annoyance, as if stepping around something unclean. He settled into the front pew, a king holding court in a barn. The church was hot and smelled of old dust and sweat. It was not a trial. It was a reckoning. Dr. Mercy Quinlan stood before the simple wooden altar, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the murmuring. She held up her ledger. "I am a physician. I record what I see. In the past month, I have treated 6 men claiming to be railroad employees or surveyors. Their injuries—" She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. 2 gunshot wounds, 2 knife wounds, 1 broken hand from a brawl, 1 case of shattered ribs. These are not the injuries of men laying track. Gentlemen, these are the injuries of men starting a war, and they all paid in new, crisp bills. A low growl moved through the ranchers. Jonah Pike stepped forward, his hands shaking but his voice steady. He held the copied manifest. This is from the depot, a shipment of mining supplies. Arrived 3 days ago, signed for by my brother, Sheriff Pike. He looked at his brother, his expression one of pain, not malice. I opened a crate. It was not drills. It was Winchester repeaters. 100 of them. Enough to arm Silas Crow's entire gang. The crowd erupted. The word Winchester was a death knell. Ash moved then. Stepping into the aisle, Taza and Mercy supported Nahas-Zan, seating her in the front pew, a silent, regal presence. Ash held up the iron drill stake, the Mallory crest glinting in the light from the window. This was hammered into the heart of the Firebird Valley, Ash said, her voice low but carrying to every corner. This is the mark of your Baron. Baron Mallory did not even stand. He nodded to his lawyer, who sprang to his feet. This is an outrage, a circus, the lawyer shouted, his voice a reedy whine. You are being manipulated by a known hostile. He pointed a finger at Ash. And by her. His finger swung to Eleanor. This is Eleanor Whitcomb, a woman of high birth who, by her own admission, stole from her father and abandoned her family. A woman cast aside because she refused a respectable marriage. We have the telegrams. She is a disgraced daughter, a woman scorned. And now she seeks her revenge by taking up with a savage lover, conspiring to slander the very men bringing prosperity to this territory. The accusation hung in the air, thick and venomous. Eleanor felt the heat rise in her face, the familiar shame. She was, once again, the disobedient, ruined woman. You are wrong, Eleanor said. Her voice was quiet, but it silenced the room. She stood, leaving the protection of the pew. I was cast aside, she said, her voice gaining strength. My father did disown me, because he is a weak man, allied with greedy men like Baron Mallory. She reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a small, oilcloth packet. From it, she unfolded a single sheet of faded letter paper. I did not just take a map, she said. I took my mother's last words. She wrote this to me the week she died. She begged my father to stop this. He refused. He put her away. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steel. She read, Horace is blinded by the promise of gold. Mallory is a devil in a fine suit. He is forcing your father to sign the proxy, to sell the public lands. It is theft. My daughter, the land is not his. It is a sacred trust. Be stronger than I was. Do not let them silence you. She looked up, her eyes locking with Baron Mallory's cold gaze. This is not spite. This is my mother's final testament, and you, sir, are the man who wrote her death sentence. The church was stone silent. The truth, raw and painful, had been laid bare. A gunshot shattered the stained glass window over the altar. Glass exploded inward. Silas Crow stood in the main doorway, his clothes ripped, his face caked in mud and blood, his eyes burning with madness. He was not dead. He held a revolver in each hand. A trial, he roared, his voice like gravel. This is the only trial in Deucehaven. He fired again, into the ceiling. The crowd screamed. Panic erupted. Men and women dove under the pews, scrambling for the exits. Stop him, Sheriff Pike yelled, drawing his own pistol. He moved forward, seeming to intercept Crow. He is resisting arrest. Pike raised his gun. He did not aim at Silas Crow. He aimed directly at Ash, who was shielding Nahas-Zan. It was a cold, calculated betrayal. No. Jonah Pike, who had been standing by the door, saw the move. He threw himself forward, a desperate lunge, crossing the space between his brother and the Apache woman. The shot was deafening. Jonah stopped, his body jerking. He looked down at the dark, spreading stain on his chest. He looked up at his brother, his eyes filled with a terrible, final question. He crumpled to the floor. Ash caught him, lowering him gently. The chaos in the church stopped. Everyone stared. Sheriff Pike, his gun still smoking, looked at the body of his brother. He got in the way, he stammered, his voice cracking. I was aiming for the hostel. He jumped in the way. You murdering bastard, Calloway roared, his voice thick with rage. He had seen it. They had all seen it. You shot your own blood in the back. The crowd, which had been divided, now turned as one. Their fear of Crow was momentarily forgotten, eclipsed by their fury at the sheriff. Silas Crow saw his opportunity. Baron Mallory and his lawyer had already vanished through a side door. The sheriff was exposed. The trial was over. While all eyes were fixed on the body of Jonah Pike, Silas moved. He was not a strategist. He was a beast. He lunged. Grabbing Eleanor from the front pew, he yanked her up by the hair, clamping one massive forearm around her throat, pressing the hot muzzle of his pistol to her temple. "Nobody moves," he screamed, his voice raw. "Nobody or the lady dies right here." Ash looked up from Jonah's body, her hands covered in his blood, her face a mask of stone. "Back off," Silas roared, dragging Eleanor toward the door, using her as a shield. "Pike, you worthless coward! Cover me!" But Pike was frozen, staring at the floor, his world shattered. Silas burst into the street. He threw Eleanor onto his horse, which was tethered nearby, and leapt up behind her. He raked his spurs into the animal's flanks and galloped out of town, heading straight up the high trail toward the Firebird Valley. Ash laid Jonah gently on the wooden floor. She looked at Mercy, who was already there, her fingers on Jonah's throat, her eyes closed. "He is gone, Ash," Mercy whispered. Ash stood. She picked up her bow from where it had fallen. She did not speak. She walked out of the church, past the stunned, grieving crowd, and broke into a run, her moccasins silent on the muddy street. She was a lone hunter, and she was following the trail of her prey. The sky had turned a sickly green. The air was heavy, electric. A high-country thunderstorm was about to break. She ran, her lungs burning, her mind cold. She was not chasing a man. She was chasing a violation. She saw the tracks, clear in the new mud, heading up the narrow switchbacks. The wind howled, and the first fat, cold drops of rain began to fall. Above her, she saw them. Silas was on foot now, dragging the horse, forcing Eleanor up the slick, treacherous rock face. The horse slipped, screaming in terror. A bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating the scene in a brilliant, blue-white flash. Silas was making for the rope bridge, the one that spanned the deep chasm, the same one he had fallen from. He reached the precipice, shoving Eleanor ahead of him onto the swaying bridge. "Get across!" he yelled. The rain was a deluge now, a roaring sheet of water. The creek bed far below was already a churning, muddy torrent. Ash reached the opposite ledge, 50 yards away, the chasm separating them. She was too far for a knife. The driving wind made an arrow shot at a man impossible. Silas saw her. He laughed, a wild, mad sound that tore through the storm. "You are too late. Apache, I told you I would be back. I will kill her, and then I will come for you." He raised his pistol, aiming not at Ash, but at Eleanor's back. Ash knocked an arrow, but she knew the wind would take it. She needed weight. She needed... Her hand went to the small leather pouch at her belt, the pouch that held her fire starter. And one other thing, the gold vein, the single, heavy, rough nugget of gold she had kept as a reminder of the land's secret, of the sickness. She pulled it out. It was the size of her thumb, heavy as lead. She had no time to aim at Silas. He was shielded by Eleanor. She aimed at the bridge itself, at the thick, sodden rope anchor, where the main span was tied to a spike driven into the rock on Silas's side. She wedged the heavy gold nugget into the split nock of the arrow. It was a crude, desperate, and powerful weapon. She centered herself, the rain lashing her face, the wind screaming in her ears. She drew the bowstring back to her ear, held her breath, and released. The arrow flew, heavy and true, a dark streak against the gray storm. It did not cut the rope. The heavy gold nugget struck the rope anchor like a sledgehammer. It smashed the frayed, waterlogged fibers against the iron spike. The rope, already strained by the storm and the weight, snapped. The bridge gave a final, agonizing groan. Silas, his pistol still raised, froze. The world tilted beneath him. He grabbed for Eleanor, but she had seen Ash's move and threw herself backward, clawing her way back to the solid ledge. Silas screamed. The bridge fell away. Collapsing into the chasm, he fell with it, a dark shape tumbling into the roaring, muddy flood far below. He was swallowed by the storm, erased by the very land he had tried to conquer. This time, there was no pool to save him. Eleanor lay on the ledge, shaking, soaked, and alive. Ash stood on the other side, her bow lowered, her chest heaving. The impassable chasm separated them. The storm, as if its purpose was complete, began to ease. The rain softened, the wind died. A new sound rose from the valley below, a low, rhythmic chant. Eleanor looked down. On the cliffs, in the passes, on the high ridges, torches were being lit one by one. Flames appeared in the darkness, a constellation of fire answering the lightning. The wildfire people, who had been hiding and watching, were emerging. Taza appeared on the ledge beside Eleanor. His hand offered. Ash had sent him the long way around, the fail-safe. He helped her to her feet. On the high promontory, the most sacred place overlooking the valley, Nahazan was waiting. The elder looked at Eleanor, her old eyes clear in the torchlight. "The Firebird has tested you," Nahazan said, her voice quiet but strong. "You came carrying the paper of our death, but you stayed, and you spoke our truth. You have the heart of a warrior, though your skin is pale." The old woman raised her hands. She held a simple band of braided leather. Woven into it were the blue-green feathers of a hawk, and pinned to the very front, glittering in the torchlight, was a single, rough, beautiful piece of raw gold. "The earth has marked you," Nahazan said. She placed the diadem on Eleanor's head. Eleanor Whitcomb stood on the edge of the rock, the wind drying her clothes, the torches of the Apache people burning bright below her. She, who had been cast aside by the wealth of the East, was now wearing the true, sacred gold of the West. She was not a runaway. She was, in this moment, held by the land itself. The ride back to Dust Haven was long, silent, and steeped in the shadow of the death they had left behind. The storm had passed, leaving the air sharp and clean, scrubbed raw. Ash had found her way across the high canyon, her path a winding, dangerous descent and ascent that took her nearly an hour. She met Eleanor, Taza, and Nahazan where the trail widened. The old woman was weak but resolute, mounted on the horse Taza had brought. They rode 4 abreast, emerging from the high country as the sun's first, watery light touched the eastern rim. They were a strange procession, the old Apache elder, the young warrior, the white woman wearing a crown of feather and gold, and the gold Apache, her hands still stained with Jonah Pike's blood. When they reached the edge of town, the church bell was silent. The street was empty, save for the muddy tracks of the panicked crowd. They dismounted, their movements heavy with exhaustion, and walked toward the church. The door was open. The body of Jonah Pike lay on the center aisle, covered by a blanket. Dr. Mercy Quinlan was kneeling beside him, her head bowed. Calloway, the rancher, stood guard at the door, his rifle held in the crook of his arm. Sheriff Pike was slumped in the back pew, his face buried in his hands, his badge and gun belt on the floor beside him. He was a broken man, weeping in dry, shuddering gasps. The townspeople were gathered outside, a silent, grim-faced jury. They watched as Ash, Eleanor, and Nahast's son entered. Mercy looked up, her eyes red. "It is done," she whispered. Ash walked past Jonah's body, her face impossible to read. She stopped at the altar and laid the scorched telegram she had taken from Silas Crow's camp upon the Bible, the one that confirmed the payment from Mallory. "He is gone," Ash said, her voice quiet. "Silas Crow is dead, but this is not—" Mercy rose. She picked up the telegram. Her voice cracked with grief, read the words aloud to the silent church. Payment confirmed. First deposit of $10,000 placed in Prescott account. For services rendered. Proceed with final extraction. She looked at the weeping man in the back pew. "He is gone. Pike, your protector is dead. Was it worth this? Was it worth your brother?" Pike flinched as if struck. He looked up, his eyes wild with terror and grief. I did not mean... Jonah." "You shot him," Calloway said, his voice flat. "We all saw it. You murdered him. For him." He jerked his head toward the hotel. He made me..." Pike finally screamed, the words tearing out of him. A full confession born of pure terror. Mallory. It was all Mallory. He had the proxy. He had the authority from the East. He showed me the papers. He said it was legal. He said it was progress. The crowd outside surged forward, their muttering growing to a roar. "He said the Apache were in the way." Pike sobbed. "He said they had to be cleared. He paid Crow to do it. He shipped the rifles. He gave me the orders. He said I would be a rich man. He said it was just business." "Where is he?" Ash demanded, her voice cutting through the sheriff's cries. "The depot." Calloway answered, his face grim. "His men came for him. They are hitching his private carriage to the eastbound freight. It leaves in 20 minutes. Ash turned. Eleanor was beside her. The town followed. It was not a mob. It was a delegation. They walked, their boots heavy in the mud, past the saloon, past the assayer's office, toward the railroad depot. Baron Henry Mallory was on the platform, flanked by his 4 dark-suited guards. His private carriage, a glistening black and gold car, was already attached to the engine. He was checking his pocket watch, his face a mask of impatient composure. He saw them coming, and his lip curled in annoyance. "This is a public disturbance," he called out, his voice sharp. "I must ask you all to disperse. Sheriff Pike, arrest these people." "Pike is finished," Calloway said, stepping onto the platform. He, Ash, Eleanor, Mercy, and Taza formed a line, blocking Mallory's path to the carriage. "He has confessed. Mallory, it is over." Mallory actually laughed. It was a short, humorless bark. "Confessed a drunken, half-wit sheriff, distraught over his brother's accidental death. That is meaningless. Now, stand aside. You are interfering with a federal commerce. You!" He pointed at Calloway. "I will have your ranch. You!" He pointed at Mercy. "I will have your license. And you," he pointed at Ash, "will hang." "And me?" Eleanor asked. She stepped forward. She was not wearing the crown. She held it in her hands. She was no longer a queen. She was a witness. "You, Miss Whitcomb," Mallory sneered, "are a pathetic runaway? You have no family, no standing, and no power. You are nothing." "I am my mother's daughter," Eleanor said, her voice ringing in the cool morning air. She held up the faded letter, the diadem of gold and feather in her other hand. "And I have her last words. She named you. She called you a devil." She did not wait. She read the letter again, her voice strong, projecting over the hissing of the steam engine. She read her mother's accusation. She read her father's telegram, the one signing away the public trust for 10%. And then she held up the final, scorched paper. "And this is your order to Silas Crow, the order to clear the land, the order you paid $10,000 for, the order that killed Jonah Pike." Mallory's face went white. The nothing woman had just laid his entire conspiracy bare. "This is—" His lawyer blustered. Stepping forward, "These are forgeries, slander, we will." "Mr. Mallory." A new voice. The young telegraph operator was running toward them, waving a yellow sheet of paper, his eyes wide. "Mr. Mallory, a wire just came in from the territorial marshal in Prescott. It is for you, sir, and for the town." He handed the paper to Calloway. Calloway read it. A slow smile spread across his weary face. "Well, Baron, it seems Dr. Mercy sent a wire of her own last night, along with a few attachments." He read the telegram aloud. "By order of the United States Territorial Marshal, all operations of the Mogollon Land and Rail Company are hereby suspended. All assets of Baron Henry Mallory within this territory are frozen, pending federal investigation into criminal conspiracy, weapons smuggling, and incitement of violence. Baron Mallory is ordered to remain in Dust Haven and surrender himself to local authorities." Mallory stared, his composure shattering. "Local authorities?" He looked at the broken Sheriff Pike, who was being marched toward them by 2 ranchers. He looked at his 4 guards. The guards looked at each other. They looked at the federal telegram. They looked at the angry, determined faces of the ranchers and the Apache. They were paid for protection, not to fight a war against the United States government. One by one, they lowered their rifles. "It is over, Mallory," Calloway said. He took the badge from Pike's chest and pinned it onto his own vest. "A temporary, necessary act. You are under arrest." The sun was high now. The storm had passed, and the sky was a deep, painful blue. The air was fresh, and in the distance, the sunlight struck the high cliffs of the Firebird Valley. It caught the thin, glittering seam of rock that had caused all this. The gold. It stayed where it was. It did not belong to Mallory. It did not belong to the town. It belonged to the earth. The town meeting was held that afternoon. In the church, it was not a trial, but a treaty. Calloway, acting as interim law, sat at the front. With him were Dr. Mercy, Ash, and Nahassan. The accord was simple, born of shared loss. The Firebird Valley was declared a protected sanctuary by the town council. The sacred sites were to be left undisturbed, managed by the wildfire people. The town, in exchange, would be permitted a single, supervised trail to the springs, a shared resource. The paper was drawn up by Mercy and signed by Calloway, and Ash made her mark beside his. It was a fragile piece, a piece of paper against a century of greed, but it was a start. Honor, Eleanor thought, did not need paper to exist, but it seemed to need paper to survive among men. That evening, in the clinic, the adrenaline finally faded. Ash sat heavily on a stool, the exhaustion of 3 days without sleep hitting her. As she relaxed, she winced, a sharp intake of breath. "What is it?" Eleanor asked immediately. "It is nothing," Ash said. "Let me see." Eleanor gently pushed aside the torn buckskin sleeve of Ash's shirt. On her left forearm was a long, deep gash, caked with mud and dried blood. "When did this happen?" Eleanor asked, her voice soft. "When I took the elder," Ash said, her voice distant. "Crow's knife. It grazed me. I did not feel it." Eleanor said nothing. She went to the basin and filled it with warm water. She brought clean linen and Mercy's strongest soap. She knelt before Ash and began to clean the wound. Her hands were no longer the soft, useless hands of the woman who had arrived in Dusthaven. They were steady, competent. They had held horses, climbed rocks, and held the dying. Ash sat perfectly still, watching her, this woman from the East, with her strange ideas of choice and her fierce, unexpected courage. Eleanor worked in silence, her touch gentle but firm. The sting of the soap made Ash flinch again. "Be still," Eleanor murmured, her hand resting on Ash's arm to steady her. Ash looked at her, truly looked at her. The gesture, the words, were the same ones Ash had used on her in the cave. A circle, completed. Eleanor finished bandaging the arm. She did not move away. She stayed kneeling, her hands resting on the warrior's knees, her gaze meeting Ash's. Neither of them spoke. There was no need. The promise made in the starlight had been sealed in blood and fire and water. Dr. Mercy came in, carrying 2 cups of tea. She saw them, paused, and then smiled. A weary, hopeful smile. "Nahas-san is sleeping," Mercy said quietly. "She will be strong again, but we will need more than this clinic. A real one, for both our peoples." "You will teach our women?" Ash asked, her voice rough. "I will," Mercy said. "And Nahad-san will teach me. We have much to learn." She handed them the tea. It was a new beginning, a hard, scarred, and honest one. They buried Jonah Pike on a gray, windswept afternoon. The entire town of Dusthaven stood on the small hill overlooking the muddy street. They were joined, for the first time in the town's memory, by a silent delegation of the wildfire people. Ash stood at the front, next to Eleanor. Nahas-san sat on a blanket near the open grave, her presence a silent testament. Taza and 2 other warriors stood behind her, their faces like carved stone. The preacher, a nervous man who also ran the general store, read from his book. His words about dust and ashes were thin, carried away by the cold wind. The town's grief was sharp, confused, and angry. Calloway, his face grim, stood with his hands clenched, his new temporary badge gleaming dully on his vest. When the preacher finished, there was an awkward, heavy silence. The white settlers did not know what to do. Then, from the Apache side, a new sound began. It was not a wail of grief, but a low, rhythmic chant from one of the warriors. A single, small drum began to beat, slow and steady, like a heart. Nahas-san began to sing. Her voice cracked and ancient, a song of passage, of a warrior's journey to the stars. The 2 ceremonies, one of words, one of song, did not compete. They merged over the grave, a strange, dissonant harmony that perfectly captured the broken, healing land. Ash did not weep, but she watched the plain pine box as it was lowered. She remembered the boy who had brought her the manifest, the man who had stepped in front of his brother's gun. He had died not for blood, but for peace. The hatchet was buried. The deep enmity, was laid to rest with the body of the man who had dared to cross it. Later that week, the real territorial marshal arrived from Prescott, a hard, thin man with clear eyes and a clean-shaven jaw. He had read Dr. Mercy's detailed wire, and he came with warrants and 6 deputies. He took custody of Baron Henry Mallory, who was pale and silent, his fine suit rumpled. He took custody of the broken, weeping Sheriff Pike. He took custody of the 3 remaining Vulture deputies, who were shackled and thrown into a freight wagon. "The railroad's assets are frozen," the marshal told Calloway, signing the transfer papers. "The proxy agreement from Mr. Whitcomb is null pending federal review, which, given the criminal charges, will be permanent." He looked at Eleanor as he said it. He did not sneer. He did not judge. He simply nodded. "Ma'am, you caused quite a stir. Seems you saved this valley." "I did not," Eleanor said, her voice clear. "We did." The marshal watched the wagons rattle away. carrying the corruption back east, where it belonged. Dust Haven was, for the first time, on its own. A new town council was formed. Calloway was elected the permanent sheriff. Dr. Mercy was given a seat, and, in a move that shocked no one, the council's first act was to formally invite a representative from the wildfire people to all meetings concerning water, land, or law. Ash was that representative. The new civil defense force was small. It consisted of Calloway, Taza, and a rancher named Gideon. They were the new law, multicultural and under the watchful eye of the council. Eleanor sat in the clinic by the light of a kerosene lamp. The town was quiet outside. She had a pen and a fresh sheet of paper. She had been dreading this, but it had to be done. "Father," she wrote. She paused, the word tasting like ash. "I am writing to you not as your daughter. As you made it clear, I am no longer such. I am writing as a witness. Your signature, your greed, nearly destroyed an entire people and a town. It cost the life of a good man. Your partner, Baron Mallory, is in chains. Sheriff Pike, your hired gun, is arrested for the murder of his own brother. Your name is tied to this. Forever." She stopped, her hand aching. She wanted to burn the paper, to scream at him, but she thought of Jonah. She thought of her mother. "I do not forgive you. Forgiveness is not mine to give. But my mother, in her letter, begged me to be strong. She believed in atonement. You are a wealthy man, Horace, and your soul is in forfeit. If you wish to claim any small part of it back, you will do this. You will establish a fund, a scholarship, in my mother's name. It will be for the education and medical care of the native children of this territory. It will be administered by Dr. Mercy Quinlan and the Dust Haven Council. You will send the first deposit of $20,000. If you do this, your name will not be spoken at Mallory's trial. If you do not, I will travel to Prescott myself, and I will read your telegrams to the judge." She signed it, Eleanor Whitcomb of Dust Haven. She sealed the envelope. She was not running. She was not hiding. She was setting a boundary. And, for the first time, she was using her family's name as a weapon for good. The weeks turned into a month. Autumn deepened. The high grass turned gold, and the air grew crisp. The new boundary markers were set. They were not iron spikes, but simple, carved stone posts, set at the entrance to the Firebird Valley. They read "Property of none, sanctuary for all," by treaty of the Dust Haven Council and the Wildfire People Nation. Prospectors, drawn by the lingering rumors of gold, still arrived. The first one, a grizzled man with a mule, was met at the trail by Taza. "This is protected land, old man," Taza said. "I got a claim, filed it right at the assay office." "The assay office does not make the law here," Taza replied, pointing to the stone marker. "You want to pan in the lower creek. You need a permit, from the council, and from them." He nodded to the high hills. "The permit costs 20% of your find, 10 for the town clinic, 10 for the Apache school. That is the new tax. Pay it, or move on." The prospector spat, but he saw the look in Taza's eyes. He saw the new badge on Calloway, who was riding up behind him. He turned his mule around. Life settled into a new rhythm. Ash, finding the council meetings tedious, spent her days teaching. She took the Apache children and 3 of the White Town children into the high country. She taught them to ride bareback, to read the track of a deer, to know which plants healed and which harmed. She was not just a guardian, she was a teacher. Eleanor, her hands now calloused, became Mercy's shadow. She learned to set a broken bone. She learned to mix poultices. She learned to breathe a new mother through the pain of childbirth, her voice calm and steady, her hands sure. She sat with Nahustzan one evening a week, patiently learning the rolling, complex sounds of the Apache language. One afternoon, Mercy and Eleanor were inoculating the rancher's children against the smallpox. Calloway's wife, a stern but kind woman named Sarah, watched Eleanor work. "You have a healer's touch, Miss," Sarah said. Eleanor smiled, her face tired. "Dr. Mercy is the healer. I am just the assistant." "Nonsense," Sarah said. "We needed a leader. We got one. We should have asked our queen." Eleanor looked up, confused. "Pardon me." "The crown," Sarah said, nodding. "The one Nahastan gave you, that piece of gold. It is not power, Miss Eleanor. It is a burden. It means you have a duty to this place, to all of us. You are the Queen of the West, child. Not because you rule, but because you are responsible." Eleanor looked at her own hands, chapped and smelling of lye soap. A responsibility, not a prison. She finally understood. She saw Ash less than she wanted. The warrior was always moving, checking the boundaries, hunting, teaching. The wound on her arm had healed, leaving a pale, silver scar that Eleanor had traced with her finger once. A silent, shared moment. One night, they were camped in the high pass, checking a line of snares. The first snow of the season was dusting the peaks, and the air was sharp as glass. They sat by a small, smokeless fire, the silence comfortable between them. "The children are learning fast," Ash said, her voice low. "The white ones are afraid of the silence, but they are learning." "I am still afraid of the silence sometimes," Eleanor admitted, staring into the red embers. "In the east, there was always noise, carriages, clocks, people talking. The silence meant you were alone." "Silence is not alone," Ash said. "It is full. It is the sound of the earth breathing." Eleanor spoke of the clinic. "Mercy wants to build a new wing, for the Apache women to come and give birth, if they choose. A safe place. The money from my father. It arrived. He sent it. Not a word. Just the money." "He bought his pardon," Ash said. "He bought his atonement," Eleanor corrected, gently. "It is a start." She felt the guilt, the old shame of her bloodline, finally begin to recede. She was not her father. She was herself, and Ash. Ash was no longer the lone, haunted warrior, avenging her dead brother. She was a leader, a teacher, a builder. "We are," Eleanor said, "building something here. You and I." Ash looked at her. The firelight played on her high cheekbones. She had watched this woman transform from a pale, terrified refugee into a strong, vital part of the land. Eleanor's hand was resting on the blanket, near the fire's warmth. Ash reached out, her own hand covering Eleanor's. It was a simple, solid gesture, a claiming. Eleanor turned her hand over, lacing her fingers with Ash's. The contact was electric, but it was also calm. It was the most natural thing in the world. You said you chose me," Ash said, her voice rough, the words difficult for her. "I did," Eleanor whispered. I choose you, too, Eleanor." Ash leaned forward. Her lips met Eleanor's. It was not a kiss of frantic passion. It was long and deep and certain. It tasted of wood smoke and cold air, and the promise of a shared life. It was a kiss that sealed every hard thing they had endured and every quiet thing they hoped to build. They pulled back, but did not let go of each other's hands. "This is my home," Ash said, looking at the dark valley below them, the stars blazing overhead. She turned her gaze back to Eleanor. "You are my home." Eleanor felt the last of the eastern ice melt from her heart. "And you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "are mine." The spring that followed the winter of the reckoning was quiet, but it was a living quiet, not a dead one. The mud of the flash floods and the bloodstains on the church floor had been washed away, first by lye soap, and then by the relentless healing green of new grass. The first news of the outside world arrived with the thaw. carried by the same telegraph that had once been an instrument of conspiracy. Calloway, his badge now permanent, read the wire standing on the steps of the depot. Dr. Mercy, Ash, and Eleanor stood before him. "It is done," Calloway said, his voice flat with a satisfaction that went deeper than triumph. "Baron Henry Mallory, tried in federal court, convicted, conspiracy, fraud, smuggling, complicity, and murder. He will serve 20 years. Pike, our Pike. He testified against him. He told them everything. They gave him 10 years. "And my father?" Eleanor asked, her voice quiet. "He was not charged," Calloway said, looking at the paper. "In exchange for his full testimony and the forfeiture of his 10% share to the territorial government, he was granted immunity." Eleanor nodded. She looked toward the high, bright peaks of the Firebird Valley. He had not gone to jail, but he had lost his money, and his honor, and his daughter. The justice was final, if not complete. The network of corruption that had held Dust Haven in its grip had been severed, its head cut off, its body withered. The town was, finally, its own. Their first act as a free town was to rebuild. The chasm where Silas Crow had met his end was a constant, dangerous reminder of the violence. The high trail was too treacherous for regular use. "We need a bridge," Calloway announced at the next town meeting, held in the newly whitewashed town hall, which had once been the saloon. The work began. It was not hired out. The ranchers brought their wagons, their lumber, their ropes, and Taza, speaking for the wildfire people, brought his warriors. They were masters of rope and wood, of balancing weight against the canyon's pull. They worked side by side, the ranchers and the Apache, sweating and cursing in 2 different languages, but building one single thing. When it was finished, a month later, it was a solid, beautiful structure of pine and heavy iron bolts. Calloway himself hammered the final spike. He unveiled a small sign, carved by one of the Apache artisans. It did not say Dust Haven Bridge. It said, simply, Jonah's Crossing. It was a monument to the man who had died to build it. The money from Eleanor's father, all $20,000 of it, sat in the Prescott Bank. It was the seed of the future. Mercy, Eleanor, and Nahad Zahn, sitting at the clinic table, drew the plans. It would be the Firebird Fund. Its first task was to build a new wing on the clinic, a wing with clean beds and warm water, for all mothers, Apache or white. Its second was to hire a real teacher from the East to work alongside Ash. It was a legacy of education, medicine, and craftsmanship, born from blood and betrayal, but aimed at healing. The day they chose for the wedding was in late May, when the wild cactus was in bloom, painting the high desert in shocking strokes of pink and yellow. It began at dawn. The first ceremony was by the sacred stream in the Firebird Valley. The water was clear and cold, tumbling over the rocks that held the vein of gold. The only witnesses were the stones, the sky, and Nahastzan. The elders stood before them, her hands weathered and frail. Ash wore her best buckskin, clean and soft. Eleanor wore a simple, cream-colored dress, sewn by her own hands from cloth from the general store. Nahastzan did not speak of love, as the white preachers did. She spoke of Dago, of alignment. "The earth needs the sky," she said in the Apache tongue, her voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "One gives the root, the other gives the rain. One is the rock. One is the fire that sleeps in the rock. You are 2 parts of one spirit. You have been tested by the Firebird. You did not burn. You were forged." She took their hands and bound them together with a soft leather cord. Ash turned to Eleanor. She held out her hand. In her palm lay a single, perfect hawk's feather. "This is my sight," she said, her voice rough. "My vision, it is yours." Eleanor took it, her fingers trembling. She then reached to her own throat and unclasped the only thing she had carried from her old life, a small silver locket, her mother's. "This was my past," she whispered. "My memory. It is yours." Ash closed her hand around it. Nahastzan raised her arms to the rising sun. The binding was complete. The second ceremony was at noon, in the town square. It was loud and bright and full of people. Dr. Mercy Quinlan, having been granted a license as Justice of the Peace by the new territorial government, stood on the steps of the town hall. Calloway stood beside her. Taza stood by Ash, his arms crossed, a look of profound, grudging respect on his face. "We are here today," Mercy announced, her Irish accent lifting over the crowd. "Not just to join two people. We are here to witness the joining of two worlds. We are here to celebrate a promise, one made in the dark, and now kept in the light." She read from a simple book of law. "Do you, Ayanakai, take this woman, Eleanor Whitcomb, to be your partner, your family, and your home, to stand with her as she stands with you, against all hardship." Ash looked at Eleanor. Her dark eyes were clear, the ice gone, replaced by a steady, quiet fire. "I do." "And do you, Eleanor Whitcomb, take this woman, Ayana Kai, to be your partner, your family, and your home, to stand with her, as she stands with you, against all hardship?" Eleanor, her eyes shining, never looked away from Ash. "I do." "Then by the authority of the laws of this territory, and by the witness of this community, which you both paid for in blood and courage," Mercy said, her voice thick, "I pronounce you family." Ash stepped forward and cupped Eleanor's face in her hands. She kissed her, a firm, sure kiss, in the bright sunlight, before the entire town. A cheer went up from the ranchers, a high, ululating cry from the Apache warriors. The two worlds were, for this moment, one. After the celebration, as the sun began to dip, the town gathered again. Eleanor stood, holding the leather crown with the hawk feathers and the single, heavy nugget of gold. Ash stood beside her. "You all knew me as the Gold Apache," Ash said, her voice carrying in the quiet. "It was a name of suspicion, because gold is a sickness. It drives men like Mallory mad. It makes them kill. The gold that lies in our valley. It will stay there. It is the heart of the earth. It is not for digging. It is not for sale." Eleanor then held up the crown. "This is the only piece that will ever see the sun," she said. "This is not wealth. It is a promise. It is the cost of our peace. It is the blood of Jonah Pike, who died for all of us. It is the wisdom of Nahastzan, and it is the honor of this town." She did not put it on. She placed it in Dr. Mercy's hands. "This belongs to the Firebird Fund. It will sit in the new clinic, a reminder of what it costs to be free and to be a community. Freedom. Eleanor had sought it by running, by trying to disappear. Ash had sought it by guarding, by staying alone. They had both been wrong. Freedom was not escape. It was not solitude. Freedom was the hard, daily, glorious work of building a home. It was the choice to stay, to fight, and to belong. The morning was cool. The promise of the coming summer heat still just a whisper in the air. It was the first light of dawn. The sky in the east a pale, flawless turquoise. Two riders sat on horseback on the high rim of the Firebird Valley. Ash and Eleanor looked down at the world they had made. Below, the town was just beginning to stir. A thin line of smoke rising from the bakery. The new clinic wing was finished, its wood still new and bright. Near the creek, a half-dozen children, both Apache and white, were already running, their distant shouts echoing up the canyon walls. They were playing a game, running toward the new bridge. From far away, beyond the next range of mountains, came a faint, rhythmic sound. Chuff, chuff, chuff. It was the sound of the train, the sound that had once been a promise of theft and invasion. Now, it was just a sound. It was the world, moving on, far away, leaving their valley in peace. The iron rails were not tearing the earth anymore. Eleanor looked at Ash. The warrior's profile was strong against the new light. "It will be a hard summer," Ash said, her voice quiet. "The snow was light. The creek will be low by August." "Yes," Eleanor said. She moved her horse closer and reached out, her hand finding Ash's. "It might be hard." Ash turned, her hand gripping Eleanor's tightly. She looked at the valley, at the town, and at the woman beside her. "But it is ours." Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are tuning in from. Please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. And let us all connect over this tale. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales. Give this video a like and hit that hype button. It truly helps get these stories out to more listeners just like you.